Hello again and welcome to another Mage Tower guide. This time we're going to be talking about the Discipline Priest. So starting off with our consumables, we're going to need Flask of the Whispered Pact, Haste Food of some sort, Potions of Prolonged Power, and Drums of Fury or Drums of the Mountain, either one, it doesn't matter. And with all that being said, I didn't use any of that for my kill. So if you feel like you need it, go ahead and go get those things, but just know that it's not 100% required. There aren't any points in the fight where you actually have to kill anything or do anything in a set amount of time. So if you want to save some money, don't get them, but if you feel like you need it, go for it. Moving on to talents, I went with Castigation as it's the easiest one to use and pretty much the most reliable for this specific situation. I went with Masochism as you're only ever going to be healing yourself. Psychic Voice is an absolute must as it's your only way to interrupt the main damage ability that the boss has in Fel Burst, so you absolutely should take this one. Honestly, on this next row, it's really down to what you want to use. I went with what was the easiest to use for me, which was Mindbender, but honestly, it's just about recovering your mana in some sort of reliable way. But I just find Mindbender the easiest one to use. I don't think this one matters that much. Use what you feel most comfortable with. Moving on, I went with Sanctuary, as I feel like, again, really easy to use. You're going to be doing this anyway throughout the fight. And the other option would be Clarity of Will. If you're really struggling with Fel Burst, having Clarity of Will to pre-cast before that goes off can be really, really good. However, you are taking away from your DPS by having to stop and cast a shield instead of continually casting Sanctuary. Now, I just don't feel that Fel Burst is that dangerous that you need to have Clarity of Will, as long as you're staying on top of your health and keeping yourself close to full when Fel Burst does go off. So keep that in mind. Moving on to the next tier, I went with Halo, as there is one part of the fight where you will get adds, and Halo makes cleaving them down a lot easier, and none of the other talents in this row do that. And finally, I went with Power Infusion, which is pretty obvious. It's the only one that really helps you in any kind of DPS capacity, so it's pretty much a no-brainer for this situation. So before we get to my kill of this, let's quickly go over the bosses, adds, and abilities that we're going to see during this encounter. So in this encounter, you're going to be fighting two bosses, Tugar Blood Totem and Yormog the Behemoth. In Phase 1, you're mainly going to be dealing with Tugar Blood Totem, however Yormog will also be casting Sonic Scream throughout the fight. You'll just have to look out for this because if it goes off when you're casting, it will interrupt you and lock you out for, I believe, 6 seconds. So make sure that you're just not casting when this goes off. Now, Tugar has 5 abilities, which sounds like a lot, but most of them are fairly easy to deal with. Most of the damage that you're going to be receiving comes from his first ability, Fel Burst. This is just a cast he does every 25 to 30 seconds that just does a lot of damage. You'll have to deal with it in 2 different ways. The first will be using your Psychic Scream, and the second one will just be mainly Power Word Shield and Fade to reduce the damage. His next ability is called Fel Rupture, which are these swirlies and an X on the ground here. After a couple seconds, they'll turn into spikes, and if you're standing on them, you'll be thrown up into the air and you'll take a lot of damage. They do take a while to go off, so you've got plenty of time to move out of it. Moving on, his next ability is called Earthquake, which is an uninterruptible channel that will drop 3 rocks from the ceiling, as well as spawning 2 or 3 eggs. So let's talk about the eggs first. These will just kind of spawn in around the room. All you have to do with these are kind of dot them up, and this is what Halo will be used for as well. Shortly after all the rocks have dropped, Yormog will then tunnel under the ground, and you'll see him kind of making a circle around the area that you're fighting Tugar. Occasionally he will use the ability Charge, which will lock onto where you are, and he will move in a straight line to you. If you get hit with this, you will be stunned for like 2 seconds, which isn't actually that big of a deal, but if he goes through one of the rocks, he will lose a stack of Fel Hardened Scales, which he has 9 of. At the end of the fight, when you're only fighting Yormog, this will come into play as they reduce his damage taken by 10% for each stack that he has. So the less that he has, the more damage that he'll take at the end. Okay, but moving back to Tugar's abilities, the next one that he has is called Fel Surge Totem. This is a totem that he'll drop down anywhere in the area, and it will start to cast a stun. It only has 2 health, so just using a Shadow Word Pain on this is more than enough to kill it. If it does go off, you will be stunned for like 5 seconds, so make sure that this is focused as soon as it's down. The next ability he has is called Fel Shock, which is just a debuff that he puts on you that makes you take damage over time. Honestly, this doesn't really do that much damage, so you can dispel it if you want to, but your atonement healing should be enough to deal with it on its own. And that's all the abilities that Tugar has. So once you've killed him, you'll be going up against Yormog by himself, which is so easy we won't talk about it here. We'll just do that with the kill video, which we will go over now. Alright, so right off the bat here, I'm going to use my artifact ability to pull, use my power infusion, and just try to do as much damage as I can to Tugar. So here we go. We're going to go, and we're going to get a Fel Burst pretty quickly right here. So I'm going to go ahead and use my Psychic Scream. And there's Fel Rupture, very easy to move out of. Takes a really long time for those to go off. And then just going back to pumping in as much damage as I can. Moving out of it again. And here's Earthquake. Make sure that the rocks don't fall on you as well. And then what I did is just kind of position myself over a rock. Well, real quick, this Fel Burst, all I'm doing is just a Power Word shield right there. But yeah, so what I'm going to be doing is just kind of position myself over these rocks so that when charge does come out, like right here, he will go through them. So right there, he loses 2 of his scales, which will help me out, obviously, later on in the fight. So there goes out another fear. Also, if you are using the DBM Challenges, the notification for charge is a little bit early from when he actually starts moving. So make sure you're staying in one place until he actually starts moving and not right when you see the notification. So at this point, you've already seen all of the fight, and now it's just about execution. So here we're getting another set of the Earthquakes, and I'm just going to position myself right here, hopefully. And here you see the charge coming through. Use my Halo, and that fortunately also killed the Stun Totem. Go over to this rock now, and do the same thing. And this way you just don't even have to think about the rocks. You'll just get them killed passively, without you having to really think about it much, as you're already standing on top of them. So here comes another Power Word Shield. Now, one thing that I did not do a very good job of is using Fade for every one of the Fel Bursts that I have to take. That just comes down to my laziness of not setting up my weak auras for this class, as I don't have them set up for a lot of some of the alts that I play. I just haven't taken the time to do it. As well as just not being as familiar with this class. So if you are a little bit more familiar, make sure that you're actually using Fade for the Fel Burst that you're taking. Here we're getting another set of rocks coming out. And you'll notice that sometimes I've gotten 3 of these adds, and sometimes I get 2 of them. So right there you saw that I took that stun. And it's really not that big of a deal to have taken that stun. It really doesn't hinder you too much. I did take a lot of damage right afterward, but I had done a couple pulls before I actually got a kill on it, and noticed that as long as I was keeping myself, above, 80 to 90%, then I wouldn't fall below, 12%. And I was pretty reliably getting down to 12%, so just make sure that you're healing that back up as quickly as you can. And now it's just all about execution and avoiding this stupid pot. Every time I did this pot always got in my way. That big melting pot. I think you can probably do everything I'm doing here closer in. I almost die again. But again, pretty close to 12, and then you can just use Shadow Men to pick yourself back up. So if I were you, I wouldn't fight him this far back. I think that you kind of have to, and again, I take that stun. Again, not a big deal. But that pot will get in your way more times than you'll want it to, and it gets really annoying. But again, it's okay to take damage. You're going to be taking damage. There's no way you can really, stop yourself from taking damage. Now, that was a pretty close call, as I got hit by the charge as well, right after I took a Fel Burst. So, you can chalk it up to me getting lucky a couple times, but at the same time, you know, you can deal with the damage. You do have enough health as long as you're keeping yourself somewhat topped up and using Power Word Shield. Another Fel Surge, and we'll get one more cycle of the charge. So if you're still confused about what charge looks like, you'll get a really good look of it again. I used it earlier in the video, but you'll get another look at it here as well. So now once Tugar's dead, now we're just waiting for him to come back up, and that's what the charge looks like. It can get really, really busy on the floor, so knowing what the charge looks like and kind of getting a feel for where it is and how fast it moves will be really helpful, as it can just get really confusing. So this will be the last charge, and then we'll fight Yormog. So he will enrage at this point, and everything he does will deal more damage, like his Sonic Scream. So you'll see it does over half my health, even though it's at full. But that's pretty much all he does here. So outside of that, it's just dealing with that, using your Atonement Healing to kind of top you off, and get him down. And that's pretty much the fight. Everything else is just avoiding the Sonic Scream and, yeah, dealing damage. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here, and basically kind of give my impression of the fight, which was just, this is kind of a weird one compared to some of the other towers. It's just such an anticlimactic end. I did like all the mechanics during the fight. It was kind of weird to actually have to take the damage, but I guess that makes sense for a healer. You want to actually have something to recover, to actually use your heals for, instead of just a DPS race, as you will. But yeah, it was okay. There you get to see me do some science and test out how long the lockout was. So it's apparently 5 seconds, which can be, really damning later on, especially when Tugar's still up. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.